Domestic violence has a resounding effect on the entire family structure. Essentially, it has an effect on the relationship of both the abuser and the victim, along with any potential children that they may have as a result of that relationship. Typically, children that are involved in households that deal with domestic violence are more likely to be abusers themselves, and in many cases, they suffer as far as school and education go as well. One of the main distinctions between a civil domestic violence case and a criminal domestic violence case is that the purpose of a civil domestic violence case is to protect the victim, whereas in criminal domestic violence cases, the purpose of the action is to punish the individual involved. If you're accused of a domestic violence action, the first thing that you want to do is stop any contact at all with the potential victim of the matter. After that, you want to go ahead and seek legal representation to help guide you with any future proceedings. If you're a victim of domestic violence, in many cases, there are a lot of pro bono organizations that are there to help. So they could help in the sense of filing, and in many cases, they could help you find shelter. So you should do a local search of any sort of facilities that could provide any sort of pro bono services. And if you don't have any in your area, then you'd want to go ahead and find professional legal representation. When it comes to restraining orders, there are different levels of restraining orders in a domestic violence case. The first is an EPO, or an emergency protective order. So if an arresting officer sees an inherent risk of harm to a potential victim, they have the authority to provide an emergency protective order, which will protect the victim up until the time of the hearing. If that's not granted, then you go to a temporary restraining order. A temporary restraining order is signed off by a judge or magistrate, and it protects the potential victim up until the time of the initial hearing. After the initial hearing, the judge could go ahead and issue a permanent restraining order, which can be for any number of years. It could be for 1, 3, or 5 years. So one of the ways in which a domestic violence case affects a divorce proceeding is in regards to child custody. If you're involved in a domestic violence proceeding and you're found guilty, if your child was involved, typically you could get no custody or very limited custody. In many scenarios, individuals that are involved in domestic violence and that are the perpetrators of domestic violence can only see their children in supervised settings. In many cases, a domestic violence case can affect your immigration status. A criminal domestic violence case can be reported to a system called CLETS, in which case the USCIS can get a copy of that, and it could affect any adjustment of status or citizenship applications that you may have in the future. Apart from that, anything in the family law typically is not communicated to USCIS. However, if an individual were to report you to USCIS, it can affect any adjustment of status or potential citizenship rights later on. So the typical process for a domestic violence proceeding is, first, you're going to want to go ahead and prepare your petition. Along with your petition, you want to have a really thought out declaration that asserts what happened, and it has as much detail as possible. In many cases, this is going to be a judge's first introduction to your case. This is what they're going to be going off of prior to meeting any of the parties. Then, at least 30 days before, you're going to want to serve the other party with these documents. Be sure that you do it with a neutral third party or through a service agency. Then, during your initial hearing, the judge is going to go ahead and hear the facts and witness statements of both parties and make a determination thereafter. In some cases, you might want to look for a legal representative to represent you in a domestic violence proceeding. There's a lot of intricacies that go on in domestic violence proceedings, and in many times this is a very vulnerable time for victims of domestic violence, and you might want to have somebody on your side who could help you develop a strategy and a game plan to make sure that you're protected with the proper restraining order. As far as domestic violence matters go, I've been representing clients in a legal capacity since 2019. However, in my efforts in the nonprofit sectors that I've worked in, I've been helping domestic violence victims since 2009. My clients select me as their legal representative because I don't set unrealistic expectations. For most of my clients, it's refreshing enough that I answer the phone when they give a call. So I try to lay out the expectations for the case prior to my client signing up. I set realistic goals and I execute accordingly. Client communication is very important to us at the Bains Law offices, It's the backbone of our firm. I like to keep my clients informed because for most of my clients, this is their first time going through a legal matter. There's a lot of uncertainties, and a lot of the client's nervousness comes from not knowing what's going on. So if I'm able to maintain a sense of transparency with my clients, the less nervous they are throughout the court proceedings, and the smoother the whole process goes. I try to answer as many calls as I can personally. Of course, in many instances, I'm not able to. I return all my phone calls within 24 hours, and I like to return all emails or text messages within 12 hours. I would definitely consider myself a small firm. I'm born and bred in the Central Valley. All of my cases are in the Central Valley, so I understand a lot of the needs of the people that are around here. The advantages of having a small firm on your case is that I get to pick and choose the cases that I take. They're not assigned to me. So I could focus my efforts accordingly, and I could have my staff have a one-on-one experience with all of my clients. Once I take your case, my goal is to see it all the way through. The reason behind us having an initial consultation is to vet the case and to see if both parties, the attorney and the client, are a right fit for one another. Once we've established that, I will see your case till the end. I maintain a professional relationship with my clients. I try my best to not only understand the legal aspects of what they're going through, but also to understand on an emotional level what they're going through. And that helps me navigate, one, my client expectations, and then two, the judicial system. In an initial consultation for domestic violence, you can expect a safe environment. Our firm's here to hear out your story and see if we could add any value to your case. We don't like to turn clients down for any lack of funds, and if in any capacity we can't help you in these sort of cases, we also try to work with a lot of nonprofit institutions in order to make sure that you get the representation that you need.